Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 3 of Stars Align, and last episode was a pretty low-key episode. We got a little bit more into the team dynamics, we got into the soft tennis, kind of the mechanics of it, and we got more with our mysterious broody girl that is super talented and an amazing artist, but is just quite negative about the world around her. And in fact, a lot of this middle school has some negative vibes and aura. But you know what? I've thought about it since watching the last episode, and it reminds me a little bit of Free of Starting Days, that movie that takes place, it's in the Free universe, but it takes place during middle school days. And that film, there's a lot more like angsty melodrama, like hormonal energy going on, and it makes sense because they're middle schoolers. Because if you're in middle school, that's around the time puberty hits, hormones and everything go crazy, your emotions start spiking in odd ways, and you kind of, it's the moment where you transition from childhood into young adulthood. And so there's a lot of like gray area and discovery and you start learning things about yourself, and it's a really odd time. And so I find it fascinating that this series chooses to go kind of the unconventional route of taking place during middle school, during that time, instead of just transitioning into high school. I find that to be a very unique, interesting choice. But yeah, we just kind of got more of the mechanics of the dynamics between the teammates and getting Maki situated and integrated into the team and kind of like his mindset about everything. And so it was pretty interesting last episode, but kind of like a transitional episode. So I'm excited to see what we do this round with episode 3. And none of the episodes have titles. It's just episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. So it's like going in completely blind and having no idea what's going to happen, which is refreshing to say the least. But I heard on Patreon through the Discord that the ED for this series, and you guys have probably commented since episode 2, but that the ED had some kind of like copyright claim, like it stole a dance or something. I don't know. I think it's cute, regardless of whether it stole stuff from something else. But it seems like another mark against the show, which is sad because I really like it so far. So yeah, let's dive in, y'all, and see what's going to happen in episode 3 here. And we are going to start episode 3 of Stars Align here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, this episode was really, really good. Oh man, I just, it's really cool to see this series delve into this middle school dynamic because, like I said before the episode started, it's all these kids just dealing with these hormones and trying to like transition into young adulthood from childhood. And I think it's perfectly represented at the start of this episode. I like that Maki, they've not fully said what the agreement is in front of everybody, but part of the deal, I like that Toma's like, look, I can carry your stuff up to your place, and it's not the team that's with him, it's Yuta and Kaneko. And Maki's like, fine. And Kaneko lives in the same apartment building, so it makes sense. And Yuta's like, well, I'm sticking around. So I love that, and I can totally understand and relate to Maki being like, you'll just be in the way, just let me do this. And then be like, okay. And he made like egg rolls and this beef and cabbage, like, and this spread, it's so nice. And Yuta's like, oh my god, this is amazing. And it's tons better than the stuff we have at home, which makes me think that like Kaneko's like, we don't have a lot of nice stuff like this in our house. And then Toma is such an odd character because he's very polite and very straightforward and very passionate. He just clearly has an anger issue and gets very frustrated, and we'll talk about that with his mom and everything. But I mean, he's not a mean-spirited character, it doesn't seem. And then we get like Maki and them. He says it's delicious. I get grumpy if I cook when I'm hungry. And I just like that they're all having dinner over at his house and being friends. And he's like, why aren't you going home? And she's like, it's just one floor down. Let me stay and eat. And he's like, ugh. I love when he's like, go die. I tell her, like, do you have a girl over there you like? Go die. And it's like, ah. I love it. Such a middle school response. But they use this to kind of explain. I like that they're using this as a way of transitioning exposition. But I like that the mom comes in. For a second, I thought the mom was going to be mad that he had friends over because, you know, they have a small place and a parent might, because there are some parents that, you know, hold up appearances and want to appear to have like a nice house and everything. And for a second, I didn't know if the mom would get mad that he invited people over because their place is so small. But then she's like really nice about it. And she's like, oh, okay. Like all these friends are over and they're like, oh, we made you food too. And I like that Maki gets embarrassed. He's like, we're not in middle school anymore. We're not in elementary school. And I like that the guys get up and introduce themselves. And Maki's clearly embarrassed. Like, that's really nice that it's a nice reminder that that they are getting older, and this is like that transition into young adulthood. But yeah, I like that this series is slice of life enough that we see life outside of the tennis court. We've gotten a lot of tennis stuff going on, especially in this episode, seeing the dynamics like put in action on the court of how it works, but then we get to see their lives and get to know these characters outside of that, which is really, really good. But man, so Itsuki, Ameno, wow, totally Todoroki vibes, right? With the boiling water. It makes sense now why he didn't change with Maki there. And I like that it's sort of established that these guys all know Itsuki's story. He's not changing with them. They all know, but they know not to ask him about it. And since Maki's new, then they're like, oh, he'll be here later. And they all kind of, yeah. And even Toma is in on it. He's like, oh, he'll join us later. And Maki's like, I don't get it. But they all are respectful enough of his background to know. Gosh. So the thing about this series is that I'm glad that Kaneko was in a better mood this episode. Like, she's just kind of like the passive observer. But if you notice, she gets closer and closer to the group as the series goes on. Like, she's kept her distance, and now she's slowly getting closer and closer to Maki and the others. Like, she wants to join in on the group. I wouldn't be surprised if she becomes like a manager alongside Yuta by the end of this. I would not be surprised. But yeah, so we get the dynamics of this soft tennis and how it works. And honestly, Maki's so straightforward. And it's not that he's necessarily trying to be mean, but he's just like, you guys are not paying attention to the game. He's like, you're not studying the game. You're not. He's like, something's off. And he's like, why? He's like, I'm a beginner and I'm picking this up. What's wrong with y'all? And because they're middle schoolers, they don't know how to articulate it in a nice way. So he just is blunt and says it. And of course, they all get frustrated with him. But then when he goes and watches the girls' tennis groups play, he's like, oh, we're not pairing up right. And that's why it's not working. And so then he can come back to the team and kind of express it in a more articulate and well-meaning way, you know. But they're all middle school boys, so of course they're blunt and they don't know how to communicate properly, and it's very genuine and natural. Like, I love this series because it feels so real. Like, the conversations they have are very genuine, and like they feel like a conversation you'd hear in real life, and I really appreciate that about this series. And you can tell throughout this match, because Maki and Toma are doing really good, but Toma is picking up all of the tricks that his teammates are trying to use to get under Maki's skin and to kind of take him down a notch. And Toma's getting really frustrated and angry about it. And when Maki kind of goes off on him, Toma jumps in and agrees, but then we find out later that really Toma just feels guilty because he's like, I'm the captain of the team. My teammates should act better than this. And as the captain, I should be doing a better job, and I'm not. And so he gets frustrated and wants to quit. But then Maki at the end is like, look, we agreed on this. I'm not going to let you quit because I need my money. So don't be thinking you're going to get out of this just yet. I love it. I absolutely love it. And then, yeah, so Itsuki having the sister that is the vice captain of the tennis team, that's interesting because Rintaro is the vice captain of this team, and he's the one kind of watching the game and keeping score right now. But again, I really, the music in this scene with the tennis game and just the action sequences, like, it was really fluid. Like, I really liked that. I didn't realize that soft tennis games were so short. It's like you score 4 rounds and it's over, and you just win, you know, the best 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5, whatever it is. Interesting. And I noticed this episode that Kanako, she never said really anything negative. She just made some passive observations. But she wasn't negative this episode, which is a step up. A step up from how she was last episode. I'm really happy about that. But Itsuki, finding out that Itsuki and Maki have some common ground. And Itsuki is not afraid to play dirty, like giving him the whelp and aiming for him. Like, Itsuki is not afraid to go for the jugular. Clearly. And that shot of the blisters on his hands. Ooh, because you don't really see that a lot in sports anime. You don't see the injuries like pop up, but there the welt was like just visible right there, and the blisters on his hands, it's pretty graphic, and they're not afraid to show you that. And I appreciate that a lot about the series, that they're not just gonna sugarcoat it. This series doesn't sugarcoat anything, which I really, really like. But yeah. So, and Toma getting mad, and it seems like Toma's had angry outbursts before, and the team kind of expects it, and Yuta's trying to be nice and like get him to calm down, and it doesn't exactly work. But then we go home with Shinjo, and I don't know, the mom has some beef with him. And you left practice for the day, just you, meaning like you quit. Your team didn't all go home. It was just you. And then she just gets mad at him. And she's like, are you going to try? And it's like, ma'am, he is trying very hard. He just got really frustrated today and left. But I'm so curious. Something went on between them to make them the way that they are with each other. And we'll talk about the brother here in a minute. But I like that Maki is speaking with Rintaro and Yuta about the playbook and seeing like the different strategies that they have. And then we go to and yeah, they're like, are you being mean? And Maki's like, I'm not being mean, I'm being truthful. Like, we need to do something about this to get better, otherwise we're not going to win. And he's so cute. Like, Maki's so cute that even when he says stuff that's really blunt and mean, you're just like, aw. So we go back to Toma's room, and in the moment during the episode, I got such like Tsukishima from Haikyuu vibes, because he has the glasses like Tsukishima. But also, if you've ever watched Haikyuu, you'll notice Tsukishima has an older brother, and Akateru, and he also has lots of dinosaurs in his room. He's like a very dinosaur themed room. So Toma reminds me a lot of Tsukishima, only a lot more passionate. But yeah, then his brother coming in, and he's like, oh, so you ditched work. It's like, And I like their relationship as siblings. And Toma's like, well, it's just pointless. I'm just awful as a captain, and I'm worthless. They're bad because I'm worthless. And Toma's like, I don't think that's true. Like, he's, being nice to him. He's like, even mom tells me how worthless I am. And I like that his brother grabs his tie. He's like, hey. He's like, none of that. Quit pouting. He's like, Ryoma. And his brother's saying this line. He's like, parents and their children aren't always going to get along. So it's not your fault, Toma. You're just not so compatible with mom. So it's not your fault. So I mean, that brings up a really good point, because in real life, kids and their parents, they don't have the same personalities. And even if you're brought up in the same household as them, you don't always agree with your parents, and your parents don't always agree with you, and you don't always have compatible personalities and get along. I think a lot of stories, they try to either do one of two extremes. They either try to make like the parents the most supportive, best parents ever, and everything's sunshine and rainbows, and we're going to support our kid with all we've got, which is great. I won't dock that for a second. Or it's the opposite, and the parents are trash and the worst, and the kids have every right to hate them. And it's oftentimes one of those two extremes. And I like that this show is kind of getting into that muddled gray area. Again, like that middle school, that kind of delving into gray areas, where Ryoma's like, look, your parents aren't necessarily bad, but you may not gel with them, and that's just part of life. It's nobody's fault if you don't get along with them. And that's just... So he says, you're not so compatible with mom. So I'm wondering if maybe their dad he's okay with. And they said his dad was off for work. So, interesting. But I appreciate that Yuta has the team. The team's all practicing even without Maki and without Toma there. So I like that. I like the team's dedicated enough. They don't just give up and just skulk around and hang out like they have been the last couple episodes. They are genuinely trying to practice. And I'm sure that Rentaro and Yuta are encouraging that. Visor chump. I love that Shingo calls him Visor chump. But yeah, Maki is studying the women's tennis. I mean, you've got a nationally ranked tennis team to monitor, so why not? But is one of them a girl you like? Go die. It's the best line of the whole series. So far, I love it. Absolutely. But he's observing, and I really, really appreciate that. And meanwhile, Toma is just kind of like hanging out on this stoop with all these seagulls. And then Yuta. I like that Yuta has a continued presence. Like, Yuta is constantly checking in on Toma and being like, hey, friend, what's up? And don't you love soft tennis? And he just sits behind him and hangs out with him. Like, I love that. I love that Toma's dedicated to being his friend. Even when he's not saying anything, he's like, I'm going to sit here with you and let you just kind of stew on things. So then we have these two douche lords come in, and honestly, I mean, he shouldn't have hit him with the racket. And we talked with Maki about that a few episodes ago. But you done goofed, boys. And they just came to be jerks. Like, they just showed up to be assholes. Like, middle school jerks. Like, they just waltzed in just to tease him. And it's like, guys. And clearly Itsuki knows these guys because he knew them on a first name basis. And he's like, you're in the go home club. Get out of here. And it's like, get lost in a cow. And of course, they're like talking about the older girls. You're all laughably weak compared to them. And he's like, nah, you need to learn when to shut up. And yeah, so Itsuki's parents are divorced. And I'm assuming the father has custody probably, but he probably works kind of like Maki's mom, and so he's not home a lot. And just, yeah, and I love that he's like, you guys are trash, I can tell by looking at you. And I like that the screen, like, you can't hear him anymore, the screen just gets kind of blurry. And he just racked him across the head. And I'm sure that it was satisfying to him in that moment. But, damn. And they all handle it in a very realistic way, where some of them are like in shock, like, what do we do? And they're all like going over to the guy to help him get his, like, to stop the bleeding and taking him to the nurse. And then he's just standing there. It will bother him. And Maki's like, just hearing it pissed me off. And I like that this is a moment for Itsuki and Maki to bond. He says, I'm the same, even though I only have a mom at home. And Itsuki, like, looks over at him like he didn't know. You still don't hit people with a racket. It's a waste to break it. And it's like Maki with that smile, like, he understands exactly what Itsuki's thinking, because he knows what that's like to not have a parent at home and to have to kind of not live like as normal as you think. But I want to give props to the art teacher, the club sponsor, the art teacher, because he handled that so well. Because these are middle school kids, they're hormonal. They're like all up in arms about everything, and those guys did deserve something because they were being unnecessarily mean. Like, there was no reason for them to do that. And I like that the art teacher is like, we can't fight, especially hitting. He's like, you're not allowed to use a weapon ever. Like, that's not. But he has his finger on the candy tin the whole time, and I wondered if he was going to offer it to him. And he's like, luckily the wound's not serious. It bleeds a lot, so it looks serious. But. And Itsuki does take credit. He's like, it's entirely my fault. And he's like, however, I know they teased you about your family situation, and so that's despicable too. And Rentaro's like, Sensei. He's like, you have to understand. He's like, they need to understand that things like this can deeply hurt people. And so he's totally gets it. He's like, I get why you did it, kid. I get why you hit them, because they were being awful to you, and they should know better, and maybe now they've learned not to do that, but you can't hit them with a weapon. Here, have some candy. Like, I love the art teacher sponsor now. It's like, dude, he handled that as best as he could, because, I mean, he could have yelled at Itsuki, but at that point, Itsuki owned up to it entirely. He said, it's my fault. Like, he knew what he was doing. And then we cut straight to them telling Maki that the reason why he's been coming late to practice is he won't change with you there, because he has all these scars on his back. It's not because he hates you. It's because he doesn't want you asking questions. And we all know. I like that everybody in the club knows about it. And that, oh my God, that just scene of the mom. And they say she was dazed and out of it, so you don't know if she was like on drugs or if she was just zoned out or just a bad parent. I mean, obviously a bad parent, because who pours boiling water on a baby when they're crying? And obviously his sister was older, but man, yeah, you just see the lighting and everything and her body language, like, and her just stepping on the toy. Like, we don't know the circumstance of their parents at all, but, and then it just going quiet, and the crib spinning, but there being no sound. Jeez. Yeah. And I like that his sister is incredibly loving and supportive of him. Like at the end there, like the sister's just like, hey, it's time to go home, you know. And it's just, oh my gosh. But yeah, it's a neat, the way this series is handling these characters having all of these relatable issues. Like, nobody's life is perfect at home. Everybody's having some kind of struggle. And we're going through the series seeing like each and every family member's struggle, which is so interesting to me. Because obviously Toma has something with his mom going on. Maki's got some messed up stuff with his dad. The situation of Itsuki and his sister like having to take care of each other because their parents are divorced and their dad probably works. It's just, it's getting to the heart of the matter that everybody's got issues going on, but they've all come together to be on this soft tennis team. And I like that. I almost skipped the end credit thing. I almost skipped it, but I was like, no, let's not do that. But I like that at the end, Maki's like, no, I figured out what the issue is. We need to repair everybody up based on our strengths instead of just pairing with whoever you want to. And it's like, Maki, look at you. And I like that Maki had Ryoma's number and was like, hey, I need to talk to Toma. I need to get my money, so you need to kick it into gear. But gosh, that was intense. Yep. So yeah, that episode, just getting more with Itsuki and his sister and their situation. And I like that this show, because you know, you have other sports anime where characters get into fights and maybe they argue and stuff, but it's not really anything, you know, crazy. No, in this one they were just clocked him over the head and there's blood everywhere. It's like, ooh. Like, this series is not afraid to beat around the bush with its tone, and it can be quite harsh and cruel and blunt, but it's kind of just mirroring what life for these middle schoolers is like. And so I appreciate the freshness of it, even though it's not... Last episode I was like, man, is this a mean-spirited show? Because everybody there was just being an asshole. And in this episode it's like, no, they're just middle schoolers, and this is kind of the attitude that they have. But it's not all mean-spirited. Like, there's some blips of light in this episode, and the team coming together despite being kind of ragtag, that I really appreciate that about it. So, But I'm curious to know your all thoughts below, and what you guys thought of the episode. This is getting really interesting, and I'm curious to see what all ends up happening in the next episode. Now that I'm curious to see how we restructure things, especially if Maki's taking charge along with Toma. Like, I'm curious to see how they restructure the team. And I liked this episode for us getting all the backstory with Itsuki and getting these character moments between all of them, but also learning about... Basically, the last two episodes have been, here are the basics about soft tennis. Here's how serves work. Here's how teams work. Here's last episode was all about the basics, about the swinging and the mechanics of it. And then this episode was, here's how a match works. Here's how this works. So we only have, 8 more episodes. But if we're looking at this in terms of like a 3-act structure, usually in a 3-act structure with 12 episodes, episodes 1 through 4 are introducing our characters, introducing the world building, and introducing the central conflict. And we've pretty much got that in these last 3 episodes. We've introduced our characters. We're getting some backstory on them and their struggles, the ones that are pretty relevant right now. We've been introduced to the middle school, to the kind of attitude surrounding the middle school. We've been introduced to the soft tennis team, the mechanics of it, how the gameplay works, and our central conflicts have been pretty set up. I mean, with our main characters, Maki, his central conflict is he needs this team to do well to get the money to help his mom. So that's the central conflict. And so we don't quite have and Toma's is trying to keep his brother's team afloat while also being captain and recognizing his own limitations. So far in these 3 episodes, we've set up the conflict and set up the show really nicely. And so I'm curious to know, usually episode 4 is like the end of Act 1. What other conflict are we going to have introduced next episode to kind of lead into part 2? So, with that being said, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, but I'm curious to know what you guys thought of the episode. But yeah, next week we will start episode 4 of Stars Align. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you all again real soon.